you are also in dialogue with other Japanese artists. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about some of those types of influences.
Yeah, I mean, I love all sorts of different paintings. Like with this work, particularly, I started thinking about Jiro Yoshihara, a lot of the Gutai painters, and his circular works, and also Kazuo Shiraga, and he did a lot of these non-representational works, especially his monochromatic pieces I'm really drawn to. But not only that, there's other artists like Hilma Off Clint, Jacqueline Humphreys, Laura Owens. There's just so many painters that I look at the same time, like Shara Hughes, and they all go into this dictionary in my head that I just pull out when I need to. And that's an important thing too. I learned Western painting, right, which is oil painting, but then also looking at how Japanese artists have used that, and also combining that with these symbols that I've used in a lot of the paintings. So with this work, Waiting on the Roof with Butterflies, I have kind of graphic, simplified, and kind of stylized pictures of butterflies embedded into there. And those are taken from kamon, which are Japanese traditional symbols and patterns. And it's this allowing to mix everything together and not having a specific boundary, or not worrying too much about labels, gives me, I guess, more freedom in the work too, and to have a wider conversation.
And from what I understand, I mean, this particular work may have come from more kind of a personal, kind of dreamlike state quality.
Yeah.
That also is what it seems to be too.
Specifically this painting, and with all the works in Neo Ceremony, I wanted them to be more of an ambient space rather than having a foreground, midground, background that's very distinguished. So more so this floating idea. And with this painting, Waiting on the Roof with Butterflies, it started off as a dream that I had, which was of a blue painting and a white circular line. And then I get these urges to want to complete these paintings and works when I have ideas in my head. So, and this is what turned out to be the work itself. And also, there's a lot of like personal things that people don't really know about, such as why I chose the butterfly. And that's because my Oba-chan had one of her sons passed away when he was, I think, about 6 or 7, and she always kept a photo of him, and it was wrapped in a cloth with butterflies on it, and she passed away. So it's kind of thinking about how death, I don't know, the relationship of death and how that visits us, all of us, at some point. And it's just really small, minuscule ways of me remembering people. And I don't really expect the viewer to understand these things, and that's okay. It's my own small conversation. And if somebody really wants to know, I'm totally fine with telling people about that.
I mean, that's amazing. I even overall, I understand the kind of personal nature of your work, but then as we continue talking about the different works, there's a lot more layers that are revealed, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Alina.
Yeah. I usually am really shy about talking about my work, so it's great that I'm like forced to talk about it.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about the symbolism. I mean, this kind of personal aspect of it for you in terms of butterfly, but also the idea of multiple meanings with a symbol, because going back to the idea of negotiating between cultures and what one culture understands in terms of symbols versus another culture, and where's that kind of in between space of that. So I wonder what we might think about that kind of
Yeah, like
idea
the
of
symbols, right?
yeah, these are seemingly plum blossoms, I assume, like that from one cultural perspective could mean one thing, what could it mean from another, and then where's that interstitial space?
So the symbols itself, I tend to first I've been more interested in floral imagery, and it's this way of inserting the languages that I speak, which is English and Japanese, and also in thinking about Japanese writing system. So kanji, which is taken originally from Chinese writing, and then there's kanji, katakana, and hiragana. So specifically kanji, if you think about it, there's a lot of strokes within one letter, but those strokes put together has this abstract idea of meaning a flower or a bird or a tree. So I think in essence, the symbol itself, it's like a hieroglyph, and they kind of relate back to a writing system. And that's my own logic. It doesn't have to make sense to anybody else. And that's how I've been utilizing these symbols. And specifically with floral imagery that I've been using, a lot of times have reference to specific seasonal time. So whether it's spring, summer, fall, and that for me relates to the passing of time as well, with death, life, that cycle of things going back. But then at the same time, if somebody isn't necessarily familiar with Japanese visual culture, these flower images are completely abstract and don't really mean anything beyond a symbol or a flower. And I think that's the important part, that these images have possibilities to be something very meaningful, and also at the same time something very abstract and not concrete as well. And that depends on the viewer. And I think because I lived in Japan and grew up in Hawaii, I try to think about these different perspectives and backgrounds that people have, and how that creates a whole new, maybe, I hate the idea of like a category and these labels that sometimes we get put into, but something more, I guess, beyond that as well.
Oh, that's great. The idea that this could be thought of as a passage of time, even, I mean, your whole body of work could be thought of as time passing, which of course connects to your theme about memory and how to honor death and the memory of death and such, and memory of people and such. So that's wonderful. One of the things that you just brought up was this idea of abstraction and how symbols could be abstracted. Your works, of course, have abstract forms. Obviously, color is a big part of it. What does abstraction do for you, I guess, is the question. What does abstraction and what does the color do for you as an artist, as perhaps, again, coming back to that idea of like negotiating cultures or identity? How does it help you?
So the floral and a lot of the symbols itself are abstracted because they have a very specific identity. For example, these are plum blossoms. And then it's important for me to mix them with a more non-representational imagery, which is perhaps the background, and thinking that non-representational means the things that you cannot see, things that are more felt, things that don't really have a definition. So it's important for me to mix these things that are a bit more specific with ambiguity, because that's what I've been, I guess, going through, kind of a lot of times not being able to explain the situations that I am, or not being able to understand why I even moved to the US. Obviously that was my parents' choice, but kind of going with the flow of things. And, the colors, it's kind of hard for me to talk about because I sometimes don't think about it too much. I just have these random ideas in my head. I'm like, oh, I really want to do a red painting. And then I'll start with this idea of a red painting. And that could be like a more orange red, or it could be like a magenta or maroon, or it could be any kind of red. And from there, like this painting, Plum Blossoms Dancing in a Red Sky, that red also translates into a different work, which was a conversation between orchids. So the colors itself kind of reflect the different artworks, and it could even happen with me looking at different artists as well and seeing a specific color or specific mark, and then being intrigued by that and thinking, wow, I want to do that too. How can I use that in my own work? And it just, I guess, snowballs from there. And there's, practical things like color relationships too, and how that, like, different colors work with each other. The color in terms of, I guess, its tone and value, I wanted it to be a bit more moody, darker, and again, something quiet and still and not so loud. And those, I think, resulted in a bit darker colors as well.
Thinking about the tonalities of your work, the different hues. I mean, things like Dark Places that you did in 2021, sorry, paintings like the Dark Places, or even I love this Connecting Again. These tonalities, the different qualities of color here are incredible. And it, like, something like this, it honestly, like, I had to look at it again and again to see all the different elements that are in there. For instance, I mean, it took a long time to see these tiny flower petals, and obviously this amazingly thin but very powerful red thread that is, just takes up one tiny space, so one small space on the left side. Your eye just is drawn to it, and you wonder what is going on with the thread, where is the thread going. But that then brings you all around to, of course, the rest of the canvas, which, looking deeply in, as you said, like having this kind of stillness to it, allows one to basically look closer and look more deeply. I love this. I love this painting, and it took a while to get, like kind of all the layers of it. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the genesis of it.
Those two paintings, specifically Connecting Again and Dark Places, I painted it at the same time using a lot of the same colors. And I guess being stuck at home or not being able to go to museums, you kind of forget what paintings look like in person. And I think these, I think about them how they would be seen in person. And like you said, it's important. I wanted the works for you to slow down, and you would really have to look at it in order to see the different hues. And that's almost like Ad Reinhardt and his usage of these very subtle, different blacks. And it's about slowing down. And, even on my phone screen, I can barely see this painting. I only see the red line. And I think it doesn't really do justice to the painting, I think, but it's interesting to think about it, how a lot of works that I see I interact with them on a digital screen as well. And maybe it's almost challenging that and kind of dismissing that, and still thinking about the physicality of the work itself and how it's important to see paintings in person. And again, that's kind of slowing down and really looking at different details.